Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
In our first hour, you really gave us a lot of insight into your personal journey in terms of how your phenomenal meeting with the great Hajj Malik Shabazz and his perceptions and what the work that he was doing. Now we want to talk about some of the myth versus reality. As you know, the perceptions of I'm going to say Hajj Malik Shabazz. Tell us about how people perceive both the media as well as even our people versus the reality, perceptions versus reality in terms of Hajj Malik Shabazz. Malcolm X.
Well, I think the biggest myth that they like to perpetrate about him is that he advocated violence. I mean, that's the one you always hear. Oh, he believed in violence. He believed in this, and Brother Malcolm believed in self-defense. When we formed the OAAU and we had the general breakdowns, we have a breakdown on self-defense. And self-defense means that if you are attacked, you have the right to defend yourself. You're not going out looking for people, to kill people. But the way, if you listen to the way they were saying, he was advocating that black folks go out, and start beating up and things with white people. And to show you how this thing developed, Joanne Bland, who's a sister from Selma, Alabama, and Joanne was one of the young people who marched on that bridge in Selma on what is now called Bloody Sunday. Yes. Bloody Sunday, it did not occur the day that Dr. King them marched. This was the day it was mostly young people. Joanne was 11 years old at the time, and I met two brothers who were like 13 and 16 at the time, and I talked to them. And they marched too, and Joanne was saying how when the cops attacked them, they were running and she fell, and her sister fell on top of her to protect her 14-year-old sister, and her sister still has a knot on her head from being attacked. I remember I told you that Brother Malcolm spoke at Brown's Chapel, but he spoke about his the international thing and how this country has only moved when you can get them to put international pressure from outside, and the federal government is forced to act, and that's the way it happens. And that was the whole thing about his whole international policy. But so that's the biggest myth, that he was an advocate of violence. And I just feel lucky that I had a chance to see Brother Malcolm occasionally, a few times in my life, in kind of a relaxed setting, where he was, laughing and talking, and, a couple of times when he used to have dinner at a place in Harlem, 130 feet called 22 West. And they had a back room back there, and sometimes he would come up there and eat with some of his top aides. They would call, ask me to come down. And so you got a chance to sit with him, in a situation like that. And I saw, that he, the different person that he was, and the caring person. Now let me tell you something. On February the 20th, 1965, I had written Brother Malcolm. 2 weekends before that, he had been banned from France by the French government. The next weekend, his home was firebombed out in Queens. And third weekend, we were having our rally. So when Brother Malcolm came to the Audubon that day, I was already there when he came in. Now, I had written on February 20th, the day before, which was Saturday, I had written a news release that I was going to distribute the next day at the rally, basically saying, how we were still behind him, and despite what was going on. I don't really know exactly what was in that newsletter. I swear to this day I don't know. But when Brother Malcolm came by the office that day, the hotel, and I was in the Hotel Teresa, and I showed him the thing that I had written. And when he read it, he said, "Oh, Brother Peter, I wish you would not distribute this." And so I said, I said, okay, because he had kept my behind once before when I had that thing by eyewitnesses to, to the murder. So I said, I put it to the side. And I don't know what happened. I never could see a copy of that thing. But so the next day, when he came into the Audubon, I was already there. You know, it has like a little lobby area. You know, you walk up these about 3 steps, you come into this small lobby area, then turn right and go into the main ballroom, which is huge. So when he came in that day, he said to me, Brother Peter, come backstage when you get a chance, I want to talk to you. So I said, okay, you know. And I said, what do you want to talk to me about, you know? And so about 5 or 6 weeks later, I went backstage. Now here's this brother under all this pressure. Banned from France, home firebomb, threats coming in. And you know what he said? He said, Brother Peter, I know you put a lot of work in that newsletter. I hope you understand why I asked you to not distribute it. And I said, of course I understood, you know, I understood. You know, and then you know, and they talk about other things. There was an article in there. So again, this brother's under all this pressure, and she's concerned about my feelings. You know, that to me was, you know, and that's February 21st.
Wow.
And so that's another, you know, this is the person that we're talking about.
Exactly.
This is the person that we're talking about. This was a great human being, a great black man, a great human being.
For a moment, talk to us about how people in our community perceived Malcolm, because were people comfortable? Was he? Did you have people standing outside the door trying to join the OAAU or the Organization of African American Unity, or how was the perception of people to the organization and being with Malcolm at that?
I think many people. I can talk that just with some of my friends. I could not get them to even come to the rallies because they were scared. They were scared that it was going, you know, because there was, you know, this whole thing going on between, you know, the nation, some people, some elements, and I always say elements in the Nation of Islam, you know, like kind of making threats. And so people, they were really afraid to come to, and then of course then some of them were afraid you might, you know, if you see that, you might lose your job, you know. So there were people who may have wanted to, who basically supported, because some of these same people, like if I asked them to make a donation, they did so. But they were they were not going to come, you know, to the rally. So that was and when you think about it, that was a real deal, because we all ended up in the FBI files. Those of us who work with him. And that thing has affected not only me, but affected my family to this day. Wow. Family members. My family always tell me the reason they all were in the D.C. area. They said we could never get jobs with the federal government because of you, because of your having been connected, you know, with the FBI files, because you were involved with Brother Malcolm. So that was I think people. But our rally, when we had a rally and he was speaking, we'd have maybe 500 or 600 people in the Audubon Ballroom. If he wasn't there, we had something, we might get 150. But I think eventually, had he not been assassinated, we would have, you know, that would have grown. People would have become aware that this brother had a serious program, and that what he was trying to do was to me the best way we were going to be able to advance and protect our interests.
We talk about the impact. You talk about the fact that Malcolm was a master teacher, and you shared with us some experiences you've had personally when he had to kind of give you feedback in terms of what you feel some of the lessons he tried to teach the community in terms of his work, in terms of just dealing with the dominant society. What was another master lesson that he gave?
Well, if you read the OAAU mission and goals, there's a section. He believed very strongly in education, of course, the right kind of education. He believed in education. He believed in self-determination. In economics. He was a very strong believer that black people should be more effective, use our collective economic resources. All of that is included in the OAAU goals and objectives. So, I mean, he had a concrete program. That's why I say, if he had been able to organize the OAAU the way he had envisioned it, we'd have a powerful organization today. We'd have a powerful organization.
Talk to us about the impact, again, just to reflect on the impact of Malcolm on the continent of Africa.
Okay. Well, as I said earlier, when he went to Africa, he spent time, and again, and this is really important, he did not meet the African leaders, those ones that I named, at a reception. You know, like, how you doing, shake hands, then you're gone. He had audiences ranging from 1.5 to 3 hours with these brothers. And when he spoke, he spoke to university students. When he was in Africa, he spoke to university students. He was covered in the press. I mean, he was really treated almost like the Secretary of State for black folks to the continent. I have no doubt that I remember my book that I wrote, my memoir that I wrote about that experience of working with him, called Witnessing Brother Malcolm X, the Master Teacher. There's a picture of me and him on the cover, and that picture was taken at a reception given by the Tanzanian mission to the United Nations. They had invited him to come to the UN to this reception they gave, and he took about a few of us with him, and I was one of the lucky few that took with him, and that's how that ended up with that picture that's on the cover of my memoir. So I mean, he was, and they came. Mohamed Babu, who was the Prime Minister of Tanzania at the time, he came and spoke at one of our rallies, and gave a great speech that's included in my memoir, his speech that he gave. So and they recognized, they gave him recognition, man, as kind of like the representative. And as I said before, because of the groundwork that he laid by going to Africa and meeting with the leaders and talking to them, the African countries after they had their meeting in Cairo in 1964, the OAAU, they issued a resolution condemning discrimination in the United States. Now, it was not the most, militant resolution ever delivered, but the very fact that they did anything like that was unheard of. And they did it because of Brother Malcolm. And I am convinced to this day that when the African countries issued that resolution, that's when the boys in the CIA and the State Department and the FBI said, hey, this cat's got to go. This dude's got to go, because they said, be it resolved. And then they listed things, and I included that in my, and I'll bet you that probably 99% of black folks do not know that this happened. Because when they talk about, when they do talk about Brother Malcolm, all they want to talk about the thing between him and the Nation of Islam. And that was bad. There were elements in the Nation of Islam who collaborated. I would believe to this day that they were told, if you do what you want to do, nobody will be punished. And I would believe until the day I die that if Hare, the one who got caught, if he had gotten away and not been caught, there never would have been a trial. There never would have been a trial. Because the other 4 people who Professor Zach Kondo named in his book in 1993, he named the 5. At that time, 2 of them were already dead. 2 was still, and the one who actually pulled the shotgun, he just died, I think a year ago, over in Newark. So I think the deal was, y'all go ahead, nobody will be punished. And the thing that kind of messed their plans was Hare getting shot in the leg and caught. And then they ran out and picked up these 2 members of the Nation of Islam and put them in jail for 20 years or something. They didn't, I mean, they supported the assassination, but they were not a part of the actual assassination. And they spent 20 years in jail. So that shows you how when you read the FBI files and how closely they were watching him and, and writing stuff and putting out stuff, they were covering our because our newsletter was the only publication that was publishing every single thing that he was doing in Africa. Everything that came, we had it in our newsletter. And I found out later that when the Africans issued that resolution, the FBI, in the FBI files, it says that UPI, which was a major, like the Associated Press, then that's UPI, United Press International. They did not send that out because they, quote unquote, did not want to give him a lot of credit for getting for that resolution being passed. So they didn't like, they did like AP. They write something and then they send it to the AP people all over the world. UPI did the same thing, but they did not do it with that resolution because they did not want to say how that resolution came about. So he was serious about this because he believed solely that the only time this country moves to protect the lives of probably black is if it has international reasons for doing so, propagandistic reasons. It does not do it because of the goodness of their heart.
Now, in terms of the impact on the continent, those who had the opportunity to speak to Malcolm, what impact do you feel it had on African liberation struggles?
Well, I don't know the impact, but I think what it did, the time that he was able to do, because of course, everything we talk about in this area was things that was being planned, because he was assassinated so early that none of this, but I think that the African leaders, at least some of the ones that I've talked about, they recognize that this brother is serious and can also help us by making our position known, in the United States, because people forget that at that time, many black folks in America did not give a good hoot about what happened in Africa. They had really kind of negative attitudes about Africa. And that's real. People don't want to believe that, but in the 1960s, when I was growing up in Tuskegee, you want to fight, you call somebody African, you better be ready to fight. Unfortunately, you still find people like that today. But Brother Malcolm was, for the Africans, he became like a way for them to get their message out and support in the black community in this country.
So when you think about this, the impact that he was having on Africa and the concerns that were being raised internally, why do you feel people felt it was necessary to eliminate?
Because the United States, he was exposing, they were the leaders of the quote unquote free world. Despite all the horrific, terroristic things that were being done to black people, mainly in the former Confederate States of America, during that period, 1955, 1965, the Birmingham bombing, Emmett Till, Medgar Evers, people were being killed. People were losing jobs. People's homes were being firebombed. All this is going on while the United States is claiming to be the leaders of the free world. When I was in 1957, when Little Rock happened, those kids were attacked by those people. And Eisenhower kept saying, well, it's the state. Till one day his people showed him the front page of the Russian newspaper, and they had all pictures of Little Rock. So the next thing, he nationalized the Arkansas National Guard to protect those kids. Kennedy did the same thing in Birmingham. Can't do nothing. The black folks say, well, we're going to have to start shooting back. Then all of a sudden he nationalized the Alabama National Guard. So, and the people who were doing these terroristic acts were not being punished. Because the federal government kept saying, well, that's a state thing. There's no federal crime. So, and Brother Malcolm was exposing that. He was exposing that to the world, really, but especially to the newly emerging countries on the continent. And at the same time, he was telling black people here, y'all need to get over this attitude that so many of y'all have about Africa and understand that a free and independent Africa is for us.
Do you think Brother Malcolm would be satisfied with what is going on in Africa now in terms of leadership? What would you see his position?
No. He would not be satisfied with what's going on in Africa, and he would not be satisfied with what's going on in the United States. I think in both the continent and here, the majority of us are still living in fantasy land. And are not, we actually think Africa must become continental. If Africa does not become continental, it'll be forever exploited. I was recently at a Pan-African Congress in Ghana in December 2018. I took with me a 2009 supplement from the Washington Post, 8-page supplement about Africa. The supplement said, headline for the supplement was, Africa on the agenda. Now, when I spoke at this, I said, y'all notice, they didn't say Africa's agenda. They said Africa on the agenda. That was the headline of this 8-page supplement. The subhead was Africa, the key to global economy. Now, if you are the key to global economy, how could you be on somebody else's agenda? You should be the dominant force in the world. So whether it's China, Asia, Europe, and Brother Malcolm understood this, whether it was China, Europe, and North America. Not China. I'm going to say Asia, Europe, and North America. They talk about each other. They fight with, do all kind of things with each other. But there's one thing they agree on. Africa is to be exploited. So until the Africans begin to understand that no individual African country, you got 50 million people. How are you going to negotiate with a country that got 1 billion people? That's like me trying to negotiate with Rockefeller. They'll sit there and talk to me for a couple of days, then they tell me what's going down. Brother Malcolm understood that. Only the continent. And to this day, it does not seem to get into the heads of much of the African leadership. They still think that my country, I can go and sit down with North America. You're not negotiating with a country. This is a continent. And no country can negotiate with a continent. The Europeans, whatever that difference among each other, but they all agree, Africa is to be exploited. Africa is what did that article in the Washington Post, that supplement say? Africa, the key to the global economy. On the real level, it should be the dominant force of the world. But Malcolm understood this.
So in line with that, when you think about if he was not assassinated, if he was able to live out the goals and objectives of the Organization of African American Unity, what are some of the things you feel would have been accomplished?
I think, number one, in North America, we would have a serious, powerful, national black organization. We'd have a national organization that would have real, there's a difference between having power and having influence. They would have power. That's what up here. On the continent, I think that though they may not be continental yet, I think that they might still be even more closer working together than they have been doing because of his ability. See, because he had that great ability. That's why I call him a master teacher. He had that great ability to teach and to explain to you why certain things were necessary. And there's no more important member of any community than a master teacher.
What are some of the key lessons, as someone who is an eyewitness, and I consider you an eyewitness to that history, do you feel that Malcolm would want this generation to do in terms of picking up the mantle and continuing the journey?
Well, I think I've said it before, the absolute necessity of unity. The absolute necessity. Not where everybody agreed with every single word or everybody, but just like they have in this country. These Democratic Republicans, they fuck it, but when it comes to dealing with the United States, they are one mind. We need to have the same thing about our community here and the same thing about the continent. This does not mean that we're going to have no disagreements about this and that and the other, but we're gonna understand that our fate is tied. And this is what he believed and what he taught those of us who were around him. And I think people who need to read and see that this is what he believed. That it was, and it's not some kind of romanticism. It's real. Because when I tell my African colleagues, I say, when you come over here to North America, and you come here to be in these cities, in Washington, and New York, and LA, and you think that's America. You need to get out of these cities and get out there in Iowa, and Kansas, and Missouri, and Georgia, and Rhode Island, and these kind of places. Because y'all think these white people, y'all running here in these cities who are very patronizing, because they feel as though, hey, you think that's the real America, but it isn't. You better, if I had money, I would put every African diplomat in Washington on Amtrak and take a train trip to California, so you can see what you're dealing with. Now you can fly back when you go out there on the train, so you can see what you're dealing with. And I would, and the same way with the black people here, I would understand that you can have all the money you want, but when they see you walking down the street in most American or throughout the United States, they don't say, "Oh, he's from Ghana, he's from Nigeria, he's from Jamaica, he's got $50 million." They see a black man. Now, once they get to know you, they might see those, but initially, all they see is a black man, and you better understand that. And until we understand that, we can talk all we want to and do all the tap dancing we want to, but only that type of unified effort is going to get us our rightful position in the world.
Well, on that note, I want to say thank you so much and basically I want to thank you on behalf of Cultural Caravan and the community for your contribution to our collective story, for you being that eyewitness to history, to in basically, as Brother Malcolm saying, setting it straight, making sure that people have a clear understanding of who Hajj Malik Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X, is in terms of what his mission was and his lesson, and basically documenting our history. And I want to thank you for being our guest today, and we greatly
appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for giving me a chance to provide some information about Brother Malcolm, who I think was the greatest person I ever met, and was a great leader. And if we just followed half of what he was advocating, we'd be in a much better position today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.